The off-brand boogeyman. Write a story like the boogeyman. Whispers in the dark in the small, unassuming town of Eldridge Hollow. Shadows danced in the corners of every home, and silence ruled the nights. The townsfolk avoided speaking of it, the thing that lingered just beyond the glow of their porch lights, the boogeyman. They said he thrived on fear, drawing strength from the whispers of ghost stories and eerie legends that wove through the community. Children were warned not to wander too far into the woods at night or to play by themselves after sunset. The boogeyman lurks, their parents would say, voices hushed, glancing nervously toward the dark tree-line. One stormy evening, 12-year-old Emily decided she was tired of the whispers and the fear that gripped Eldridge Hollow. Her friends, Sarah and Jonas, had dared her to prove the tales wrong. "There's no such thing as the boogeyman," she declared with a mix of bravado and trepidation. "I'll go into the woods and bring back proof that it's all just make-believe." With a flashlight in hand and her heart racing, Emily ventured into the dense thicket that bordered the town. The wind whispered through the branches, and the world fell silent except for the distant rumble of thunder. She reached the old oak tree, the spot where she heard kids say the boogeyman was born, birthed from the fears of children long ago. As she stood there, the air turned still, and the darkness wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. She called out, "I'm not afraid of you." Silence answered, amplifying the pounding of her heart. Just then, a chilling breeze swept through the grove, and she heard it, a low whisper, echoing all around her. "Emily, Emily," it called her name, slithering through the air like smoke. She spun around, the beam of her flashlight cutting through the darkness, but she found nothing. The whispers continued, a mixture of pleading and laughter, growing louder, as if they were drawing closer. Suddenly, shadows began to move outside the circle of light. Figures flitted between the trees, dark and shapeless, eyes glinting with malice. Panic surged in Emily's chest. The tales were real. She turned and ran, heart racing, determined to escape whatever horrors the boogeyman had unleashed. Thorns snagged at her clothes, and the laughter grew louder, mocking her escape. "You cannot run from what you fear," the voices taunted. Desperation fueled her flight, and with each step, she felt the chill of something dark behind her, breathing down her neck. Just when she thought she couldn't run anymore, she burst from the woods, collapsing onto the familiar ground of Eldridge Hollow. The porch lights bathed the street in warm light, mirroring the safety of home. She scrambled to her feet, heart still racing, and dashed inside, slamming the door behind her. Breathless, she shared everything with her parents, who exchanged worried looks. That night, she lay in bed, terrified but alive. The whispers had faded, but promises lingered. She would never underestimate the power of fear again. From that day on, Emily became the protector of her friends. "Don't dismiss the tales," she would say, her eyes wide and earnest. "There's truth in the shadows of Eldridge Hollow." And as the wind howled outside on stormy nights, she knew the boogeyman was watching, waiting for the next curious soul to test their courage. In the heart of the woods, the whispers continued, echoing through the trees, a constant reminder that some legends should not be trifled with. Insert. Retry. Write a story about a ghost that writes horror stories that come true. The haunting of Hollow Grove in the quaint town of Hollow Grove, nestled between misty hills and endless fields, a legend lurked in the shadows. It was said that a ghost haunted the old Branson house, a crumbling mansion at the edge of town. Long abandoned, it was filled with echoes of laughter and sorrow. But most importantly, the spirit of a long-dead writer named Evelyn Branson resided there, rumored to write horror stories that had a chilling way of coming true. The tales of her spectral writings had deterred many from entering the house. No one dared disturb the ghost of the writer, whose eerie narratives breathed life into their fears. But curiosity had a powerful grip on 16-year-old Clara. Ever since her class had studied local folklore, she felt an inexplicable pull to the Branson house. One dreary afternoon, armed only with her notebook and a flickering flashlight, Clara decided to uncover the truth. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation as she pushed open the creaking gate and stepped onto the overgrown path. The house stood before her, its windows like dark, empty eyes. As she entered, the air grew chillier, and she could almost hear whispers wrapped in the dust. Clara wandered through the dimly lit rooms, her footsteps muffled by the thick layer of grime. Finally, she stumbled upon an old study, its walls lined with shelves of forgotten books, and in the center, a solitary typewriter covered in cobwebs. Feeling drawn to it, Clara dusted it off and took a seat. She glanced around, half expecting to find Evelyn herself, but only silence enveloped her. With every key she pressed, the typewriter began to rattle and tap on its own, forming words on a yellowing sheet of paper. "What's happening?" Clara gasped, her heart pounding in her chest. The ghostly words materialized, weaving tales of terror, a haunted forest, a creeping mist, a dark figure watching from the shadows. As she read the story aloud, she felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over her. An icy breeze swirled around her, and the typewriter's keys struck with increasing fervor. Before she could escape, the story unfolded in her mind. A wicked spirit awakens in the forest, seeking revenge on those who disturb its slumber. Suddenly, clouds gathered outside, and a rumble of thunder reverberated in the air. Clara's heart raced as she realized the story wasn't just ink on paper. It was manifesting before her very eyes. In the distance, she heard the sound of rustling leaves, and as she looked out the window, she spotted a thick mist creeping through the trees, enveloping everything in its path. Panic set in. She realized she had unwittingly summoned the legend Evelyn had penned. Desperate to stop the unfolding horror, Clara frantically typed, her fingers flying over the keys. "It must end," she shouted, her voice echoing through the empty house. "Leave us in peace." But the typewriter typed back, almost mockingly, "You cannot change what has been written." As Clara fought against the growing dread, memories of her friends flashed through her mind. "They're in danger," she thought, recalling their planned camping trip in the very woods that Evelyn had cursed. With a burst of determination, Clara ripped the page from the typewriter and fled the house. She sprinted through the overgrown path, clutching the tale that threatened to consume her friends. When she reached the campsite, thick fog poured into the clearing like a living thing, lingering around her friends. Their laughter had faded, replaced by confusion and fear. "Clara!" they yelled, and she could see shadowy shapes forming among the trees. "Run!" Clara shouted, holding up the page. "It's the story. It's coming true." With the fog swirling dangerously close, Clara recited the words she had written. "The spirit is bound by the truth. Release it, and all shall be saved." As she spoke, the ghostly mist struggled, swirling violently around them. The dark figures, echoes of Evelyn's tale, began to dissolve in the light of her courage. In a final burst of energy, Clara shouted, "Your tale ends here, Evelyn. You are free." The shadows, once menacing, flickered and faded into the night, leaving only silence behind. The fog dissipated, and Clara's friends regained their composure, bewildered but unharmed. Back in the Branson house, the typewriter stood silent, awaiting a new story. Clara understood now. The weight of such power could never be taken lightly. And while Evelyn's ghost lingered in the background, a part of the house forever, she vowed to never again let fear control her. From that day forth, Clara wrote her own stories, ones that inspired courage and hope, preventing the darkness from ever taking hold again. But every now and then, she would hear the distant tapping of keys in the old Branson house, as if the ghost was tipping her hat to a fellow writer born anew.